love this in comparisons to last week's episode. I love the fact that he is just relaxed. You can see he's actually starting to chew. He had a little bit of a question in the beginning, which is totally normal. But I love the fact that he has come along so quickly, even in this somewhat considerate short amount of time that I've been working with him. And you can see he's allowing me to just, be distracted, put my whip everywhere, get myself situated with the lunge line. And the next thing that I want to kind of talk about, we're going to be hitting quite a few different topics today. And the first one is walk, trot, canter. So he is working on his walk, he's working on his trot, and we're slowly working on the canter. And I wanted to show more of the cantering than I did the other gaits because progressive cantering to me is a pretty vital thing to be teaching a horse. A lot of us, it's hard for us to picture in our minds wild horses actually doing canter work on a circle in the wild. In fact, they don't. They go pretty much straight lines from point A to point B to their watering hole to shelter. They don't usually do circles. That's more of a man-made thing, whether they be in a round pen or on a lunge line or free lunging. That's something that we've had developed them doing. So horses naturally have a harder time holding faster gaits in a circle, which is why quite a few of them in the beginning, on top of not knowing what we're asking them to do and feeling slightly panicked, most of it's also because of how unbalanced they feel. So what I would like to do with my guys is I like to gradually bump them into a trot. So you'll see he will hold a complete circle, and then I will gradually ask him to slow down. So immediately he might not do it. He might not recognize the fact that I'm asking him to trot. He might just keep on going for a couple more rotations. But over time, he's going to recognize that I'm asking him to slow down verbally. And wouldn't you know it, it's actually more comfortable to trot when I ask to trot because sooner or later I'm going to ask him to canter again. So not only am I getting his response to picking up the canter, I'm working on his response to slow down, and I am also helping him develop balance. And I don't know if you guys have noticed, but he is much more balanced and he's much more fluid. This particular episode, he's not quite as choppy. You'll notice, even though he has a couple moments where he just kind of goes, bah! And he kind of just bolts forward and, has a little bit of fun and swings his head. You'll notice that his inside stifle isn't locking up quite as much, and he's not dragging that hind leg quite as much. So he is actually progressing very well and not only building himself mentally, but physiologically as well. So the next topic is going to be a little bit touchy and probably a little bit controversial, but I'm going to talk you guys through it the best that I can. So sometimes when you're training horses, what I like to do with mine is I don't like to just teach them how to go forward, but I also like to have control of all of their body parts. So that includes their hind legs and their front legs. So in the beginning stages especially, forequarter yields and hind yields are very, very important. And this is something that is not only going to be taught on the ground, but as I progress, I want to teach them this under saddle as well. So somebody at some point has taught Indy how to do a hind yield because as you can see, he understands it really well and he moves away from the pressure. So we are also going to discuss pressure because people tend to get stuck on either asking the horses very soft and they just kind of stay there, or they just come right out of the bat and smack them, and the horse is just really confused as to what they're asking. So you are going to match the horse's energy And that means if your horse is really passive and soft and responsive, you're not going to go any harder than how your horse is responding. If your horse isn't responding to what you're asking, you're going to go a little bit harder each time. So what I tell everybody, whether they're riding or they're doing groundwork, is I always like to start in threes. I suggest, I ask, and then I make. So this is going to also go into following through with your cues, because if I suggest and you don't do it, I'm going to ask, and then if you don't do it, I'm going to make you do it. So what I'm teaching him is that every time I ask you to do something, you will need to do it, because I will keep on increasing that pressure until you do it. So as you can see, I'm doing the 4/4 yields on both sides. What I find really interesting about Indy is that he responds better to the offside than the onside, which makes me believe that somebody at some point probably did try to teach him. Most people that train horses to yield are going to do it on the onside, because if you're in an in-hand showmanship class, for example, all of your turns are going to be clockwise, which would be on the onside. So he's having a really hard time, whether or not this is his first time being taught this, or whether or not he has learned this before and he's gotten away with not listening. That's totally fine. I'm just going to keep on working with him until he gets it. So as you can see, he's really trying to figure out, okay, if I'm going to take my shoulder, and he's trying to figure out he knows what I'm asking him to do, but he's trying to figure out all the other doors that might possibly be open that he can go through. So you notice he's more defensive. He's actually taking his shoulder and he's actually pushing it into me. He's not actually taking his leg and moving it away from me. He's actually using his whole entire front of his body and pushing it into me. So what I'm trying to get him to understand is he needs to move away. Now, when he does move away, he's not moving away that particular front end. He is actually pulling forward away from me, or he's pulling backward, or he's taking that shoulder and putting it into me. Nothing that he's doing is an actually true yield. The reason why I also keep stopping is I want to kind of regroup. The moment he gets it, and that means I just want one step, and then I want him to stop. I don't want him to panic, because if I leave that 4/4 he almost gets it here, but then he stops and he turns to face me. What I want him to understand is if I can get him to yield how he yields on the offside, that would be fantastic. Nothing that he is doing is an indication that he understands what I'm asking him to do. So I'm going to keep asking him, starting off soft and increasing until he gets it. And just right up here, right there, that's what I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rub him, and I'm going to kind of flick the whip back and forth so he understands that this is action without need for reaction. I'm not giving him the same verbal cue. I'm going to go back to the offside and reaffirm that he can do it on both sides. And again, here you see he's actually doing a 4/4 yield heel. So I just thought that was very interesting thing to add in here is also this particular exercise. I love this exercise, and what this is doing is it's not only teaching him to bend to pressure, but it also puts him in a situation he has to think. And the thing is about this particular rope exercise is that he could very well panic and he could kick out, he could strike out, and he actually has to follow the pressure. The pressure is going to be tightening around his hindquarters. And just within a couple of seconds, I mean, he does not have a fidgety bone in his body, really. So within a few seconds, and this is his very first time doing this exercise, you wouldn't know it by looking at it, but he's learned very quickly that if he follows that pressure, it's not going to hurt him. So I just do it a couple of times each side for just to reaffirm that he actually does know it. And one thing I will also say is when you're introducing your horse to new things like yielding, like picking up a canter, like this particular exercise, you don't want to beat him to death with it. You want to do it a couple of times on each side, and then you kind of want to move on to the next thing. See, I'm just elated that, he got it, and I clapped and I cheered for him. I didn't really realize I had done that until I watched the video and I was editing it. I laughed so hard. Like, I do some really weird stuff while I'm training. So, this is another fun thing because I put this tarp down and I was thinking, okay, we're going to do maybe like a part 1 and a part 2. And I get to show you guys how to move your horses around an object that they have an issue moving around. And, wouldn't you know it, he has the personality much like my stallion Khalil. Just this very fearless personality, not much bugs him. And the first time I put the tarp down, he didn't have an issue. So then I said, well, why don't I change the dynamics of the tarp, move it up, put it over obstacles? No snort and blow. He has an ear on it, but he's just like, whatever. So he can feel safe enough to move around it. So then I get the bright idea of, okay, if Mr. Genius can go around it as well as he can, what happens if we keep it lopsided? Surely that will kind of make him question his abilities. And as you can see, no such thing. He is just a happy camper who is happy to do whatever I am asking him to do. So I don't really think he's going to have a problem with obstacles in the future. In fact, I can kind of foresee him being a great trail horse at some point. So I hope you guys had a good educational time watching this video. I hope to see you guys back for next week's episode, and you guys have a great rest of your week.